Because,
I think that...
Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
I think that part's just going to depend what the regiment kind of like, how can you build regiments is going to look like. If there's a hero that unlocks shamans in the regiment and you don't have to be a whole bunch of drops to take a lot of shamans, like, definitely.
I think Gobstruck for sure will do it. Anyway.
I hope he does.
I'm talking with Leonard, because apparently the last time we did something like this, you, me, and Aaron, I didn't say your names, and people were like, who were you talking to? It's like, well...
I saw that.
Yeah, so oops. But thanks to all the patrons, right? Let's have a good time. I don't know, Barons of Dice, whatever. Let's go. So we were sort of prompted to this discussion because we were talking about like what we want to see in Ironjaws, just in terms of like the casters, and then we sort of got on a topic of how many casts are we expecting, and I was sort of saying that I'm expecting like a heavier magic meta than we did in the previous season, because people are really excited that their casters can now cast, you know, like a smorgasbord option, like toolbox, between, you know, 3 or 4 manifestations, between a few spells in all the books, in the lores, between unlimited spells and places of power. I think people are essentially going to be very excited and are going to be running like 3, 4, 5 casts way more often than we thought, or than we did, maybe even at the end of third. And then you were saying that you half agree. So tell me what you think. Tell me what you think here.
So I think you're pretty right on your read of like why people are incentivized to take magic. People are super excited for these manifestation sideboards, basically, that they get to decide on, that are going to help their army. They just get 3 free endless spells now, which is awesome. Places of power giving you an extra cast is really great since casts went down. Kind of across the board, but also like, so the thing I was talking about the other day about casting bonuses being more rare is part of why I think that this will be a pretty magical meta, but only for very specific armies, that because this is going to be a heavy magical dominance meta, in the sense that like any army that can do magic really well is just going to make any other army unable to really get off the spells that they need. Seraphon is going to feel really bad to play against when you want to get off a manifestation or you need to get off that great green hand. Way worse than it was before, I think. Because you have less casts now. And I mean, I guess, you know, Swamp Call is +1, which is great for Cruel Boys, because +1 is so rare now.
Oh my God,
but armies
so
that
good.
need to get off like their teleport spell but don't have bonuses to cast, or armies that like really need to rely on Ironjaws, right? Like that was always one of the classic problems with the Big Wa army as well, is that like even when you get to the +1 to cast on the table, only having +1 to your teleport if you're against an army with a bunch of good unbinds is risky, because you're only going to get it off sometimes, and you need that teleport to do battle tactics or get units in and stuff like. So like that was one of the ways that the army was weaker, is that armies with good magic could kind of disrupt the thing it relied on to function. And I feel like if armies that don't have casting bonuses try to rely on magic too much, they'll run into that same problem Big Wa used to have, where there are just going to be certain matchups that their army can't do what it needs to, because they're kind of building relying on getting off this spell or something like that.
So can I so let me repeat back to you what I'm understanding that you're saying here. So you're saying that like magic is weaker across the board, and so the magical dominant armies are going to magically dominate even harder than they did last edition. The gap will grow. It'll be more feast or famine between magically dominant armies and armies that just like have a lore but no bonuses to cast or something like that. You know, like they won't be able to use magic, I think, as well as they could in third, because when they pair against a magically dominant army, it'll just get completely turned off. So I kind of agree with what you're saying. I think that, but I have a feeling that meta will come in 6 months.
Yes.
Right? It won't
People are going to play around with stuff early.
Yeah. And I think people are basically going to be like, I'm 5 casts now, I'm ogres.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, ogres is, I think, actually an army that can play as a magic castle now. They have a +1 to cast sub-faction. I think the pot is a place of power. So they can just like get plus to cast. If they take the Maw Pit with one of their leaders, the Butcher, I think, they get to measure their ranges from the whole edge of the pit. So like they can extend spell ranges artificially that way by kind of like garrisoning the Maw Pit. They have some really cool magic options now, actually, and they have a good debuff spell lore. They might just be an army that wants to spam manifestations and their own spell lore and, you know, debuff you really hard in Counter-Strike. Yeah, I don't know. There are some armies that have that, like OBR has a sub-faction that gives all of their wizards +1 to cast.
That's pretty strong.
So armies that have those kinds of options will probably want to take magic. Yeah, absolutely. And they'll probably take like 5 casts. But the other reason I was a little skeptical about this is that just like the tax on heroes being linked to drops in general, being a trend in this edition, makes me feel like people won't want to take too many wizards if it's going to cost them going up to like 4 drops or 5 drops or something. So I guess think you'll see casts be more limited that way.
So I totally agree with you that some armies are going to be like the have armies and the have not armies for Magic, because when without primal dice and with places of power give power level, right?
Yes.
So they give +1 casts.
Yeah.
So more casts without a bonus is like fine, but a magical dominant army that does have bonuses to cast is going to shut you down a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So we're going to see armies that are magic have armies, I think, is also going to depend a lot about, like, if Gobsprack unlocks Swamp Callas, for example, right? You could have Gobsprack and 3 Swamp Kala Shamans as a regiment and be like, well, I'm 5 casts. Right?
And he's your War Master, so you have room for another unit in that regiment if you want to.
I thought it was +3, and then it was +2 for the regular ones. Or am I wrong there?
I think it's regular regiments are 1 hero and up to 3 units, and then the General's regiment gets an extra unit.
Yeah. Without going too far off topic, though, I think Gobsprack might actually not be good in 4th, because you can't take Bodyguard. And I have a feeling that Cruel Boys is really going to value taking Bodyguard on a Sludge Raker.
Well, you can take it. I think you can take, like, it depends what Gobsprack will unlock. So if Gobsprack unlocks all units in your army because he's your War Master or something, then you could take a Sludge Raker and 3 Swamp Callas in his regiment and make the Sludge Raker a Bodyguard. Yeah, if you want to put it on the Sludge Raker, then Gobsprack might be tough that way, but you could just put it on a different unit in Gobsprack's regiment, like take 3 Swamp Callas and then take like a unit of 20 Gut Rippas in there and give them Bodyguard or something like that.
Yeah, but then the Bodyguard only works with Gobsprack. And it's like the Sludge Raker, the Sludge Raker being that -1 castle with the,
because you don't want Gobsprack in.
No, you want Gobsprack flying around the flanks, throwing out endless spells, right?
Yeah.
So if the fact that you lose that, to me, like when I was looking at lists or whatever, but I don't know.
That's a good point, actually, because it's mandatory that he becomes your general, so the Bodyguard only works for him. That's an interesting downside to that army.
Yeah. So when I was looking at, like, I spent a good amount of time the other day building Cruel Boys list, like just thinking about them. Yeah. And what I sort of landed on at the very end was a Swamp Boss Scumdrek with a reinforced unit of Hobgrots sitting in front of him with Bodyguard, right?
His ability, does it give them crit mortals on their ranged weapons as well as their melee weapons? Is that what that does?
No. I think it's just melee. But still...
So you have to charge with the Hobgrots?
No. Why do you have to charge?
To use the mortal.
No. Right? No, they just get crit mortals.
For their ranged weapons as well, yeah. For the grenades.
No, I think that it's only for their melees. But they deal as many mortal wounds as Cruel Boys do. Or as Gut Rippas do.
Oh, yeah, no, I get that, but, like, yeah, you have to charge in with the Hobgrots to do that, right?
No.
Like, to do the mortal wounds in melee.
I don't think so. You just receive.
Well, how are you going to do mortal wounds in... Oh, you just get charged.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, and then make them strike last.
Well, you make them strike last, the Hobgrots are going to deal 14 mortal wounds, right? It's like... Yeah. And then they get -1 attacks, even if you don't strike last from Bodyguard, like... And then you have Slippery Scumbag on a Vulture. And he takes
you can make them the Bodyguard.
Yeah. Yeah, and then with the Vulture, you also take the 5-up ward artifact, right? The Mork's Eye Pebble. Mm-hmm. And so then the Vulture can Slippery Scumbag into position and then pop the 5-up ward, and then combat happens. So it's like -1 attacks, 5-up, like there's a lot of things. Anyway, just last thing, and then I gotta bounce and go back and hang out with my family, but how many casts do you think, like Ironjawz, Cruel Boys, like armies in general, how many casts do you think we should be bringing? Because I know that 0 is going to be a terrible idea. Not being able to interact with manifestations is going to feel awful.
I'm a skew kind of player. So my impulse is that if I'm not playing an army that can really do well at Magic, that I don't want to take or rely on very much of it, because it's going to feel bad for me when my one spell gets denied. So I'm definitely not going to think about it in terms of relying on it that way. If I have a good wizard available to me in Ironjawz, I might take one cast, but I think I'm actually more excited about the priests, which will give you like banishment access anyway for manifestations.
As long as you have a way of getting rid of manifestations. I think you need at least 2. Personally.
I would take probably 1 or 2 War Chanters in Ironjawz right now. I guess it, again, depends on what regiments unlock and stuff, but I'm more the kind of player who would say, no, I'll just take 0 and like try to index higher and skew into like a different aspect of my list. Like I can hit harder in a certain way, not play any wizards because I just like don't want to get, countered basically by other lists where I try to use it once. But I think that on average you'll see like probably 2 in armies like that. 2 is a pretty standard number to be able to try to get rid of 1 or 2 manifestations or have like one really important unbind for when your opponent tries to summon something in your hero phase, because having 0 will make it so that if your opponent wants to cast in your hero
you're
just
have
to
trouble.
get the casting roll. You can't fight it.
Or if they summon manifestations that you're looking at their manifestations going like, that sucks.
Yeah, and I think that manifestations too, especially summoning them in your opponent's hero phase, is going to be like a really cool combat trick that people are going to use a lot, where it's like I summon a static manifestation, especially something like Shackles, and I put it close to you, and if you can't move out of combat range with it in your movement phase, you're locked in combat with it, so you can't charge. And that's gonna shut down movement for a lot of armies because they're treated as units in the charge and combat phase.
Yes.
So if you're within 3 inches of my Shackles, which reduced your movement by 2 or 3, by the end of your movement phase, you can't charge.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And that's a really cool counterplay to deny a battle tactic or deny someone moving onto primary, or like just, and that's going to be something that I think you need to bring 1 or 2 unbinds for, at least. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I'm out of time. I gotta go back and do some family stuff, but thanks for taking the time, Leonard. I appreciate it.
Yeah, always. It's always a blast.
See you later, buddy. Like, subscribe. Wah.